guys. So this will be the third session of World History. I'll give you a quick break and I'll see you back at 4:05. I'll share my screen and then we can begin. So today is the first content session that we're going to be having of world history, and we start off with the first era that we're learning about, which is the 1200 to 1450 era, or the classical era, the post-classical era. And so we're going to start that off by learning about classical India. We just need some basics from 600 BCE to 600 CE. So the object of this part of our course is to analyze how the further development of Hinduism continued to provide a bond among the people of India and an ethical code to live by. Hold on, let me change the... There we go. So what we want to do here is, this is a list of all the This is a list of all the objectives that we have, which includes describing core beliefs of Hinduism, analyzing how Hinduism affected India's gender and politics system, analyze how Hinduism affected gender, how Buddhism emerged and how it asserted universal truths, what's the next one? The origins, ideas of Buddhism. So we're basically just going to be going over the basics of all the world religions. Let me try to fix this real quick. Sorry. Sorry, we had a technical issue. But getting back to the presentation, these are the main ideas that you're going to need to know for this period and this specific lesson. We talk about architecture, we talk about role of cities, we talk about some trade. So first we're going to start with the Vedic age, which is 1500 BCE to 500 BCE. And here we can take a look at this quick map about Aryan migration, Indo-Aryan migration into India around 1750 BCE. So this was when people from the Indus River Valley, as you can see here, people from the Indus River Valley moved in to more central India, western India. They moved further down into the peninsula. So we have the pastoral people who depended on their cattle and the warriors who depended on horse-drawn chariots. India was also a keystone for writing. So here we have Sanskrit writing. You don't need to know all of these, don't worry. It's just a quick chart to let you know what it looks like. And these are just some of the early writings of India. These are the Vedas. So here's where we start getting into religion. So the Vedas are part of an Indian religion called Hinduism. It's the most common religion in India, and they were written around 1200 BCE to 600 BCE. So they were written in Sanskrit. If we saw the last slide, that's the language they were written in, and they detail some of the core beliefs of Hinduism, which is hymns and poems, religious prayers, magical spells, and lists of the gods and goddesses. So as you can see on the left, here is a picture. We can take a look at all of the religious writings, all of the Vedas of Hinduism. And here we have the Rig Veda, which is the oldest work. So this is the social hierarchy of Hinduism. So at the bottom of the social hierarchy, we have the pariahs, or the Harijan, which are the untouchables. These people were considered the worst of the worst in India. Then we have the Shudras, the Vaishyas, Kshatriyas, and the Brahmins. The Brahmins were the scholars, the Kshatriyas were the were the warriors, and these were merchants and workers. Here we have a much more detailed explanation of the caste system. So we have who is the mouth, the arms, the legs, and the feet of this idol. Alright. The Vedic age was when the foundations for Hinduism were established. The Hinduism is one of the oldest religions in the world, and we get to see all of its foundations, all of the basics of it, here in the Vedic age. So we have, how do Hindus worship? So we have meditation, pilgrimage to sacred places, which includes the Ganges River, praying to different gods, shrines, and temples, following rituals, worshiping in nature, and worship also depends on your social class, which is also known as your jati, or your gender, and then your stage in life. This is a picture of Om written in Sanskrit. So these are some photos, Hindus and nature. We have the mountains here. Here's a man bathing. Then we have a child and a cow, a temple, and some holy places. This is a great example of another religious place. This is a rock cut temple, the late 7th century. Hold on. Okay. The late 7th century, you can just take a look at this photo. The next one we have classical India. So these are the main questions of learning about classical India. So what empires were there in classical India? When did they rule? How much of India did they rule? What was their government structure like? And how did they unify their diverse empire? So the Maurya Empire was the first of many empires in classical India, and it started with Chandragupta Maurya, and he founded it around 320 BC. The capital was Pataliputra in the Ganges Valley, and this is just a list. You can just take a look at this really quick. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but this is basically the history of the Mauryan Empire and how the Mauryan Empire came to be. So here you see Ashoka conquers a subcontinent, and then the conversion to Buddhism. Then we talk about improvements in the infrastructure, and then improvements in politics, talking about farming, agriculture, and then the eventual collapse around 180 BCE. Here is a quick map, so you can just take a look at this. Then we have the Kushan Empire, which is Indo-Europeans. They invade India in the late 2nd century. Late 2nd century BCE, sorry, and they control modern-day Afghanistan, northern India, and they collapse just a little while later. There's not too much information on them, so all you really need to know about them is that they were around late second century BCE, and they sort of helped with the trade routes. Here is a map. So you can kind of see it's outlined right here where it was, some of the bigger cities starred. And then the Gupta Empire. This is one of the big ones. It's founded by Chandragupta in 320 CE. So you might notice that there was another guy back here named Chandragupta, but that's all together, and this is in 2 separate names. It does get a little bit confusing, but it's a lot easier when you associate them with their specific empires or specific dynasties. This one's the Gupta Empire, the other one would be the Mauryan Empire. So the Gupta Empire was a cornerstone for taxation, bureaucracy, road building, and law codes, similar to the Maurya dynasty, but just a little bit more elevated. And it relies on alliances with local rulers, tribute payments from rulers, and overrun by the Huns around 550 CE. Throughout all of these empires, in these classical empires, the jatis, or the social classes, were very important in keeping the public order. So here is another map that you can look at. So here's what the society was like in classical India. This is just a quick slide, got some bullet points you can read. So they talk about the social classes, they talk about political boundaries, many different languages, not much contact between social classes, hardly any slavery, land owned by villages, and influential merchant class. So there were a lot of big religious changes that took place in classical India, including the formation of Buddhism, the conversion to Buddhism by Ashoka, which caused a lot of others to convert as well, and the spread from Central Asia, from India to Central Asia, from there to East India, and the Gupta Hindu who claimed to have been appointed by Hindu gods. And that leads to a decline of Buddhism in India, but it remains prominent. It remained prominent in Central and East Asia. Here is a picture of the temple. And here's a picture of some caves, religious caves. All right, so now we have legalism, Taoism, and Confucianism. So our main question for these three is what the conditions were like in India that led to the rise of new philosophies and religions. So China during this dynasty put very strong stress on the mandate of heaven and the notion that China should be ruled by only one dynasty. So this also included the Warring States period. It's, in my opinion, one of the most interesting periods in Chinese history, perceived as a time of chaos, disorder, and traditional Chinese religion included belief in heaven as a supernatural force. Here's a map of the dynasty and the Warring States period, and you see how we have all these different sections, how China is split off into those sections. Then we have legalism. So legalism saw philosophy as the be-all, end-all, as the ultimate ruler, and humans were seen as stupid and short-sighted. So they needed to be ruled through incentives or punishments, and they could not be ruled with positive reinforcement. So the only social classes of value were peasants and soldiers, and there was nothing in between. All right, then we have Confucius. So Confucius was born to an aristocratic family in northern China, and he tried to solve China's problems by creating new philosophies, and students collect his teaching, which are the famous Analects. The main elements of Confucianism are moral examples of superiors should restore order, 5 mostly unequal relationships with our father-son, older brother, younger brother, husband, wife, ruler, subject, and friend, friend. And the goal was absolute harmony in society. So the superior needs to be sincere, benevolent, show genuine concern, and the inferior responds with respect and obedience. So these are some of the main. So kindness, propriety, respect, and filial piety. So the impact on society and culture of these three ideologies was very great. People had a capacity for improvement. Education was the key to moral betterment. And as you'll see throughout the rest of the eras, you'll see these Confucian ideas be carried over. You'll always see that education holds a high standard, and there's a strong stress on rituals and ceremonies. Here we talk about the bureaucracy as well. So here we talk about the examination system. We're taking a look at how they have to pass tests to achieve positions in government through a merit system, and this was established during the Han Dynasty. And there's education in theory was open to everyone, but in reality only for those with enough resources. There's also a family model for the state where filial piety and ancestor veneration were held in very high esteem, and they were all seen as training ground for reverence to the emperor. This is also some of the social impacts. Women were seen as inferior to men. Education so they can better serve a husband and raise sons. They justify inequalities in in China, and rulers have to follow moral norms or forfeit the mandate of heaven. And the secularism of Chinese elite society really caused a lot of issues and a lot of great changes that we'll also see carried on into some of the later subjects. These are the sacred states of Confucianism. So this symbol to the right means total harmony of righteousness in your old life and in your relations with your neighbor. This is a picture. It shows a Confucius pattern, good and evil, the Temple of Heaven in Beijing, the Temple of Confucius, and an ancestral tablet. This is the Forbidden City. It's just a quick map. We don't really need to go really too much into detail on this, but you can just take a look. It was a Confucian city as it was meant to be created as a model of the whole universe. and you can read these. You can read that. This is the Confucianist thought about state, and the main guiding question is what should good government be based on according to the source above, and how does it reflect the ideas of Confucianism? So you can go ahead, you can read this using some of the information we've been through before, and using this paragraph, we can talk about, you answer this question and just go ahead and send it in the Q&A. I'll give you all about 5 minutes, so at 4:25, we can continue. All right, someone has a question. I think you might have an answer. I will let you talk. You can go ahead and, oh, okay. Not anymore, I guess. If you have an answer, you can put it in the Q&A, or you can raise your hand and I will let you talk. If you do decide to raise your hand to answer, just go ahead and keep it up for a couple seconds so I can find you in the participants section. Okay, so it's 4:25 and I got one answer. Let me take a look. So someone said, a good government should be based on the ideas of Confucianism. Okay, that's correct. But we want to get a little bit more specific than that when we're answering the question. So we want to say that a good government should be based on the ideas of Confucianism, such as, so in the above paragraph, you see that they talk about filial piety, they talk about respect between the main relationships defined in Confucianism, and they talk about dealing with faithfulness and kindness. And so then you want to somehow relate that, say that reflects the ideas of Confucianism because this is what we'll be elaborating. Someone asked how you came. Oh, someone asked just how do you submit answers? You can just go ahead, type them in the Q&A, send them to me in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I'll let you talk. If you want another minute or so to answer this question, to answer the next question or think about it, just let me know. So this is an excerpt from The Great Learning, and it says, if the ruler has virtue, he will have the people with him. If he has the people with him, he will have the territory. If he has the territory, he will have the wealth, and if he has the wealth, he will have its use. Virtue is the root, while wealth is the branch. This is a very long paragraph that I'm not going to read out. You can take a look at this on your own. And then here. Now it's on to Taoism. So what were the origins of Taoism? So it was founded in the 6th century BCE, and by the legendary Lao Tzu, who supposedly wrote The Way and Its Power, and the ideas were explicitly expressed in the 4th century BC, or the Warring States period. So the main ideas of Taoism were withdrawal into the world of nature, behavior should be spontaneous, individualistic, and natural, and the focus should be on nature and not society. So Tao means the way of nature and a principle that underlies everything, or the force. So we have the impact on Chinese culture. It encouraged people to withdraw from society and lead simple, uneducated lives, contemplation in nature, mediation, and it was complementary to Confucianism, so one could be both. And so popular Taoism also adopts magic, fortune telling, and search for immortality. So when you're reading about Taoism, there are a few American philosophers or American historical figures that it might remind you of. Does anyone have any idea who we might be talking about? What historical figures display the characteristics of followers of Taoism? Anybody? Okay. It would be people like Henry David Thoreau. As you might know, he moved into the woods to live by himself, to be more one with nature. He was a writer, and the people with him, who all led that sort of like naturalistic, living in the woods, sort of spontaneous lifestyle. So Taoism also provided the ideology for the Yellow Turban Rebellion, which was 184 to 204 CE, and Yellow Turbans demanded utopian society without landlords and government. Here are some Taoist symbols. And here's a chart that's very helpful when trying to classify them. And this is some Taoist art. It's a little bit hard to read. Let me move this around. And this is the sacred sites of Taoism. You can take a look, just another map. And an excerpt. All right. Next up, we're going to be going on to Greek science and philosophy. So I do have another whole presentation on this. So there's a lot to cover in Greek science and philosophy, but we're just going to be going over the surface right here. So Homer was in the heroic age. Early philosophy is the world permanent or changing. So we start with Democritus, who is also a scientific figure, and he said that all physical things are formed by combinations of tiny particles called atoms. Sophists was said that man is the measure of all things, and that there's no common objective reality that all people grasp in the same way. That truth is relative to each individual, and pleasure is the highest good, which is an ideology called hedonism. Then we have Socratic philosophers from 470 to 322 BCE that said truth and reality are absolute. So this is a quote from Socrates: "The unexamined life is not worth living," and he believed that truth is in the mind but hidden by false impressions, and you can only know truth through inquiry and curiosity, and he stressed the importance of honor and integrity. There's also Plato, who was a follower of dualism, that the world is imperfect, changeable, and different in appearance to every individual, and the world we perceive is an illusion. The real world is a world of ideal forms, and that philosophers will discover the perfect, eternal, real world. Republic, Plato's Republic, his famous work, said that society should be governed by philosopher kings. Then we have Aristotle. Aristotle talked about reality, form and matter. Logic is the key to truth and happiness, and by logic, people can gain knowledge. He also talked about the golden mean, which is perfection, virtuous, and excellence. And between extremes, when neither adding something nor taking something away, that's when the improvements will be made. So, government would be ruled by the middle class, devoted to general welfare of the people, and you should use census to classify science. This is also the foundations of taxonomy, which is classifications of organisms. He also developed inductive thinking in the politics and ways to strengthen urban communities. Here are some more and just their quotes or their main ideas. So Thales said, "The most difficult thing in life is to know yourself." Xenophanes said, "Men create the gods in their own image." Democritus said, "Nothing exists except atoms and empty space. Everything else is opinion." This is Plato and Aristotle from one of the famous paintings of the Renaissance. Plato is saying, "As the builders say, the large stones do not lie well without the lesser." These are direct quotes. Aristotle says, "A great city is not to be confounded with a populous one." So this would be Athens, yesterday and today. So this is old Athens and newer Athens. This is Piraeus, which is Athens' port city, which is going to prove to be very useful for trade. So here, early Athenian lawgivers include Solon and Cleisthenes, and they created the first democracy. So the golden age of Pericles, as we see here, was 460 BCE to 429 BCE. Pericles was a very important historical figure in ancient Greece, ancient Rome, and here you can see some pictures. Athens, the art and sciences, its drama and tragedies. They talked about Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, and the scientists were Pythagoras, Democritus, and Hippocrates. So some of you may know Hippocrates as the father of medicine. Pythagoras is the Pythagorean theorem triangle guy. And Democritus, as we just talked about, he theorized about atoms, and that everything is made of atoms. This is a example of what a philosopher thought would be a good city, a good prosperous city. This is Phidias, and this was his Acropolis, or his utopia. And this is the Acropolis today. We also have the Parthenon, which was an important part of Greek history in Athens, and the Agora, another important structure. All right. The classical Greek ideal was, as you can see in these pictures, we won't really go over that for too long, but that just goes into a little bit of the social aspects and cultural aspects of ancient Greece and ancient Rome. It's a picture of Olympia, and here we see the ancient Olympians, athletes, and trainers. Olympia was a temple to Hera, and the 2004 Olympics, which were developed from the Olympic Games of Greece. So now we're going over Hellenistic Greece, which is 324 BCE to 100 BCE. These are some photos of Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was considered to be one of the greatest warriors of the time. He conquered a lot of land. You can see here, this is all the land that he conquered. It starts right here. So by 332 BC, he had this area in Macedon, like a little bit of Egypt, got some Anatolian area, and then 330 BC, he goes into this, he conquers some of Mesopotamia, and then he moves into the Indus River Valley, Parthia, Gedrosia by around 326 BC. This is Alexander the Great in Persia. He's also notable for having conquered lots of Persia. So the Hellenization of Asia was basically when Alexander the Great and major Greek cities were founded in Asia. They moved inwards to the Middle East. You see we have a lot here near Alexandria, some near Athens, Byzantium, Sparta. We've got a city there. A lot of them around the Mediterranean Sea, and then we see just a few more, a little more scattered, nearing the Indus River Valley. Hellenistic culture also had a great influence on the people of the time, of the culture of the time, and it replaced dialects of language with a common Greek, which was meant easier communication between Egyptians, Syrians, Judeans, led to worship of the Greek gods, which was not really accepted universally, and Jews rebelled against Hellenistic culture, and then we have the Maccabean revolt, that was diaspora. So Judaism had one God, man in the image of God, beauty of balance, and Hellenism says lots of gods, goddesses, gods in the image of man, beauty as an ideal. So here's some more influences of Hellenistic culture. As we see here, the sculpture became more realistic in terms of art, and cosmopolitan cities. Alexandria becomes the model with the huge Library of Alexandria. Inhabitants became cosmopolitan, not just citizens of a particular polis, and they become ultimately the culture of elites because and started the base of later Roman culture, and as it penetrated into the sub-Saharan Africa. Hellenistic philosophers were also a very important part of Greek and Roman history. So philosophy became accessible to a wider audience. Affluent members of the population, including women, which was very rare for the time, began to study philosophy, and they focused on the problem of human happiness. Epicureans said that knowledge originates and stops in the senses, and pleasure is the sole good, and pain is the sole evil, and that man must moderate himself in reference to these desires. So as you can see here, this is just an example where they say this material thing, cake, is good, but eating an entire cake would make you sick, and being sick is evil. This is just a really quick, simple example of what Epicureanism is. So Stoics, including Zeno, was named after Stoa Poike in Athens, where Zeno taught the universe functions according to a plan of goodness. He called this the natural law, and it was his guiding principle. So nature is understood through reason. All persons are inherently equal, as all share a spark of reason. You can live in harmony with nature, but need to control your passions. So this talks about cynics who preached a return to nature, the rejection of conventional mores, the key to man's happiness, and they did not consider themselves members of any nations. For example, we have Diogenes, who made his home in the streets of Athens and made a virtue of extreme poverty. He lived in a large tub, and he walked the streets carrying a lamp in the daytime, claiming to be looking for an honest man. Diogenes was also known for being one of the more amusing philosophers. There was also, of course, the skeptics. By doubting everything, they believed they could attain a state of perfect tranquility, but they didn't even believe that. Next, we have Hellenistic science. So then first we have Hipparchus, trigonometric tables, and he gave methods for solving spherical triangles. Pythagoras, who wrote about the Pythagorean theorem, and then Euclid, who wrote about triangles and circles and irrational numbers, and lots of three-dimensional geometry. If you've taken a geometry class, you know that Euclidean geometry and Pythagorean theorem is very important principles for that. We also have Hellenistic science, which includes physics like Archimedes' lever and hydrostatic discoveries, and Aristotle's physics and metaphysics. Here are some pictures you can take a look at. Hellenistic science also discussed astronomy, applying logical thinking and geometry, Anaxagoras, which was the supposed cause of eclipses, and the Aristarchus, that the Earth goes around the sun, and Thales is that the Earth is round. Hellenistic science also included the basis of medicine, also with Hippocrates and many other early doctors. So you could learn to understand and treat disease by using careful observation and logical thought, was their belief. So Hippocrates dismissed the notion that magic or spirits caused or cured disease. We also have cartography or map making in Hellenistic science. In the Earth, they said that the Earth is a sphere, and Claudius Ptolemy wrote Guide to Geography that remained an authoritative reference on world geography until the Renaissance. Here are some photos of some ancient philosophers, ancient scientists. We also have finally the legacies of the Greco-Roman world. So we have rationalism, which talked about philosophy, science, and history. Then we have humanism, which talked about truth, art, and athletics, inherent order, natural law, physics, and taxonomy, and politics, which described government, civic responsibility, and democracy. Next we have Buddhism, last of all. So these were the early centers of Buddhism. We're running a little low on time, so I'll go through this a little quick. So this is the essence of Buddhism. Buddhism said the middle way of wisdom and compassion. It was a 2,500-year-old tradition, and the three jewels of Buddhism are Buddha, the teacher, Dharma, the teachings, and Sangha, the community. So Siddhartha Gautama was the Buddha from 563 to 483 BCE. He was born in northeast India, and he was raised in great luxury and meant to be a king. At 29, he rejected his luxurious life to seek enlightenment, the source of suffering, and he lived a strict ascetic life for 6 years. Rejecting this extreme, sat in meditation, and he found nirvana. This is the main teaching of Buddhism. The fundamental cause of all suffering is desire. Therefore, extinguish the self and don't obsess about oneself. So by giving up all material things, one can eliminate all suffering. So these are the four noble truths of Buddhism. These are the guiding principles of Buddhism and what every Buddhist knows. There's no suffering in the world. There is suffering in the world, and to live is to suffer. This was found out by the Buddha when he was young and experienced suffering and death in others. 2 is that the cause of suffering is self-centered desire and attachments. 3 says the solution is to eliminate desire and attachments. 4 says to reach nirvana, one must follow the Eightfold Path, which, as you can see here, says right understanding, right speech, right livelihood, concentration, mindfulness, effort, action, and intention. The Eightfold Path following the Eightfold Path religiously will lead to nirvana. So this means the union with the ultimate spiritual reality and the escape from the cycle what they believed was the cycle of rebirth. This is a picture of the Buddha. It's the Buddha's head in Pakistan. It's just some Buddhist art. So there were many types of Buddhism as well, including Theravada Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, and Zen Buddhism. Theravada Buddhism is the oldest school, and it said the way of the elders, founded in Southern Asia, focus on wisdom meditation, and it has over 100 million followers today. This is a quick map of where the Theravada Buddhists were located. Mahayana Buddhism was the great vehicle, which was founded in Northern Asia, which include China, Japan, Buddhism for the masses. So the goal is to not just the individual escape from the cycle of life, but the salvation of all humanity through self-sacrifice. This is a map spread of Mahayana Buddhism. This is a picture of a Bhutanese sculpture. And last of all, we have Zen Buddhism. This is the meditation school. So they seek sudden enlightenment through meditation and arriving at emptiness. They use the meditation masters. So their main ideas are beauty, art, and aesthetics, which includes gardens, archery, tea ceremony, and calligraphy. Buddhism was relatively quick to spread. It quickly spread over India, which meant had many followers from lower castes, as it didn't discriminate between castes as Hinduism did. It became the official religion under King Ashoka of the Maurya dynasty. When then he sent out missionaries to spread Buddhism, as it spread along the Silk Road. The Kushan kingdom in Central Asia and northern India played a large role, and trade routes as well caused the spread of Buddhism. There was also monasteries from Korea, China, Japan, which followed trade routes in Indian Ocean to Southeast Asia. So this is the Kushan Empire. They were an Indo-Germanic people. They ruled a large empire that controlled a large part of the Silk Road from the 1st to 3rd century. Their culture was influenced by Central Asian, Indian, and Greek traditions, and they were also big in the spread of Buddhism. Here is a map on the spread of Buddhism. Some more maps, some more items to look at. And these are the pictures of the Buddhas of Bamiyan, Afghanistan. So this is the large statues that they have in a Buddhism religious spot. These are pictures of some Kushan coins depicting the king and Buddha using a Greek script. And the next guiding question is, how did Buddhism change? So over the years, over this specific period, Buddhism changed a lot. So now we're going to look into that. So early Buddhism stresses like asceticism, the community of monks, Buddha being seen as a human being and not a god. And this was Mahayana Buddhism. It became popular during early centuries of the CE, but they began to worship Buddha as a god. Bodhisattvas, which were the enlightened beings, were seen as examples of spiritual excellence. Important stations in the life of those people, of those beings, became sites of pilgrimage, and it spread from India to Asia, to Central Asia to East Asia, and it was assisted by the monasteries along the Silk Road teaching the new faith, for example, Nalanda near Pataliputra. So then we have popular Hinduism, which promised salvation to anyone who follows the dharma of his or her caste. So the dharma of their caste is basically their mission in life, and that replaced Buddhism in India. This is a piece of art showing Buddha and Hercules in the mingling of Greek and Buddhist architecture. Here we have the Gandhara Buddha in northern India. And then we have the Buddha in China. So now we're just going to take a look at some Buddhist art and architecture. This was a Buddhist temple. The Shootagon Pagoda in Burma. This is Borobudur, another temple, and a sculpture on the same temple that we looked at before. So lastly, we're just going to take a quick look at Christianity. So where did Christianity spread and how? It's going to talk about the rise of Christianity first, where Judea was ruled by Romans during the lifetime of Jesus, and Christianity spread by the Apostle Paul among cities in the Eastern Mediterranean. So Christianity became very popular because it promised salvation to all social classes, and unlike Hinduism, it didn't discriminate between them. So this adopted all elements of Middle Eastern cults. Romans were tolerant towards other faiths, but Christians refused to worship Roman gods, which led to their persecution. The conversion of the Roman Emperor Constantine in 313 CE caused the Edict of Milan, and 395 CE, Emperor Theodosius made Christianity the state religion. Christianity was spread by 12 disciples and other missionaries, and many early members from the lower classes, slaves, women, promise of eternal salvation independent of social class or gender. Like we said, this is why Christianity was very appealing. Early churches showed care and support for each other. They spread soldiers to remote areas, the Roman Empire, the official religion in Axum, Ethiopia, and Armenia, and the minorities in India. So this is a chart, map on the spread of Christianity. So now we're going to take a quick look at some documents on religions. Like we looked at last class, we talked about the document-based questions, analysis of documents. and we're just going to analyze how responses to Buddhism differed, evaluate the extent. We're just going to look at some questions, try to answer them based on the documents. So. Here we are. Okay, so we're going to analyze how responses to Buddhism differed. So this is the first document we're going to take a look at, and it was of a leading Buddhist scholar, and we want to source document 5. So in the chat, I will type in the main sourcing ideas as we went over last class. H is for historical context. I is for intended audience. The first P is for point of view, and the second one is for purpose. So we've got about 10 minutes left, so I'll give you 5 minutes to just try and source these documents, or just tell me which of the four, which of the HIPP would you use for number 5, and just a little bit on what you mean by that. Again, you can type it in the Q&A, you can send it to me in the chat, or you can raise your hand. If you choose to raise your hand, make sure to keep it up for a little bit so I can allow you to talk. Okay, so I got 4 answers so far. Somebody said for document 5, the first person I got said H. Okay. They did not provide any reasoning for that, so we'll get to that in a little bit. But another person said H, and they did provide reasoning. They said, no, document 5, historical context, because it provides importance of cultural influences in East Asia. So when you're writing a response for this, historical context, if it's not an image that you're trying to analyze, if it's not an image that you're trying to source, writing historical context is usually a little bit more difficult. I understand where you'd be coming from in this section, but you might notice that if you are trying to write a full couple paragraphs of response on it, there's not really much material to go off of. So while H is acceptable, it's not necessarily the best choice. Someone said the second P, which was purpose. They said the purpose is to praise the sages. Um, while that is what it seems at first, it does say they were the perfect sages. You want to look a little bit deeper. It's absolutely acceptable to use purpose, but you do want to look a little bit deeper into the meaning of what this is. So you might want to say there is to praise the sages and establish the main ideals of Buddhism or something like that. Or you might want to go a little bit more specific. Someone said I, maybe non-religious people or Buddhists. So they said, okay. Yeah, I intended audience, so that's absolutely acceptable as well. Intended audience is, in my opinion, that's what I chose to do. Intended audience is the best way to source this because you can describe you can describe the Buddhists and you'll have a lot of material to work off of. You can go very specific about the impact of this. You can talk very specifically about the impact of Buddhism, conversion, things like that. Okay, let me just dismiss these. Okay, so yeah, those are all good answers. For this one, for text, usually anything is really acceptable as long as you can provide enough backing for it. Do remember that when you are doing your document-based questions or DBQs, this will be a full-length essay, and you'll just be using this for like a couple sentences of proof or a couple sentences of background information. But for any text document, while anything but the H is usually preferred, it's going to give you the best results. All right, so that's about all we have for today. Today we learned about religion and we learned about Greek science and ideals. And next week we'll be learning about Greek philosophy. We'll be going a little bit more into detail into Greek philosophy and Greek ideals. So I'll see you guys next week and I will pass it on.